The Fabian Socialist motto is, remold the world nearer to the heart's desire. This picture is a description of Bertrand Russell's cathedral window, in which you see two men reshaping the world. Oh, indeed, they pray for this reshaping of the world. And above the world, you'll see a shield with a wolf in sheep's clothing. They are planning to destroy America. Well, this is the Gore Report on Reinventing Government. We are reinventing what the Founding Fathers gave us. Thank you, Al Gore. Interestingly enough, this little report on reinventing government, creating a government that works better and costs less, you'll see some very interesting symbolism. You'll see 4 stars that are 5-pointed inverted stars on this document, which represent a pentagram, the Star of Satan. Now, the government does not make mistakes like this, and to prove that they didn't make a mistake, they did the same thing at the bottom of this document. And I didn't bring the whole pamphlet with me, but on the back of it, there's bullets, and they're all 5-pointed inverted pentagrams as well. Now, if you know that the Al Gore family has always been financed by Arm & Hammer, who financed the Bolshevik Revolution along with others, that ought to be a scary thought, and it might explain just a little bit of why we may be seeing pentagrams mixed in with our vice president. This picture right here on Arm & Hammer's shelf is a picture of his friend, Lenin. This says, to Comrade Armand Hammer. So obviously money controls what's happening in Washington, D.C. Now, long ago, there was a war against an evil man, we were told. I believe he was an evil man, Adolf Hitler. The individuals who represented the various parts of the world, the Allied nations, who fought Hitler, are seen here. Stalin, FDR, and Churchill. What do these individuals all have in common? Were they Catholics? No. They were all of the same religion, though, and that religion was the religion of Freemasonry. And Adolf Hitler mentioned that he had a pack of Freemasons fighting against him. Going back to symbolism, which is absolutely key to the New World Order, in this European poster for travel, we see all inverted pentagrams. Below, the Tower of Babel. To the side, Europe, many tongues, one voice. I love this poster because it shows really what they think of us. If you can see down here at the bottom of this, it's a bunch of people, workers, some with children and so on. And these people are made out of blocks. In other words, we're a bunch of blockheads. Now, the New Age spirituality, which is coming into, it's here, it's now, it's not coming at all. It's probably pretty well over. It's symbolized by edifices in the United States. This happens to be one. This is called the Guidestones of Reason. It's in Elberton, Georgia. Take a trip. It's there. We have a new 10 Commandments today. The first commandment on this new Guidestones of Reason is maintain the population under 500 million. Now that's a vote for depopulation if I've ever heard one. Just if you'd like to travel there, this is a map. It's northeast of Atlanta. about an hour's drive. Elberton, Georgia. Many people have gone there now, and they've actually seen this. Now, the New Age. The New Age has been with us for a long, long time. It is not something new. Where does the New Age come from? It comes from Freemasonry. The New Age is a magazine. The magazine has been published by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry for 100 years. Until Paul Fisher came out with his book, Behind the Lodge Door, with over 1,000 references from this journal, and they changed the name from the New Age. So the New Age is Masonic. The all-seeing eye is Masonic symbolism. It's on the back of the American dollar bill. It's an occultic symbol. And it goes back to the days of ancient Egypt. Even in the eagle of E pluribus unum, occultic 13s, 13 leaves in the olive branches, 13 bars and stripes in the shield, 13 arrows, 13 letters in E pluribus unum, and on and on and on and on. This is something I received not long ago. It's a newsletter called Last Trumpet Newsletter. This individual says, beware of the Promise Keeper movement. Recently, there's been a great stir in so-called Christian circles about the movement known as Promise Keepers, founded in 1990 by Bill McCartney, blah, 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 football team, affected thousands, hundreds of thousands of men who claim to be Christian. Pastors from all across the nation are insisting that the men of their churches attend the Promise Keeper conventions. These are strictly for men only. He says, I do plan to complete expose of this group in the near future, but due to lack of available space, I will. I want to warn clearly, I see Freemasonry and witchcraft running through this movement, which has scheduled conventions in 13 major cities for this year. This movement now has attracted over 500,000 men to its ranks and expects to have 1 million. God help us, he says. This ecumenical apple is one that the Pope himself would love to pick. There is so much to be said about Promise Keepers, but a small sample of what they believe is as follows. Promise Keepers believe that as a part of mentoring, every man must be accountable to some other man, especially in the one's areas of finances, sexual life, and relationship to God. This partner gained through mentoring, then, must be given complete freedom to inquire into any of these areas at will. I thought that the tie-in between the 13s and this 13 was especially interesting. Now I have a quote from Mr. Manly P. Hall. Have any of you ever heard of Manly P. Hall? Manly P. Hall is a 33rd degree Freemason, he's dead now, and a Satanist. He says, it is the general opinion that revolutions begin with the common people. But this is not true. The benevolently informed always, he says, always guide and direct public opinion. Now, who's one of the benevolently informed? This individual was one. He was the sovereign pontiff of Freemasonry and the author of Morals and Dogma, Freemasonry. He told us in Morals and Dogma that the Knights Templars were excised, if you will, from Europe and from the Catholic Church because it was held that they worshipped strange gods. This god in particular, Baphomet, was one of them. The Knights Templar, some people believe, evolved, if you want to use the term, evolved into what we know now as current modern-day Freemasonry. You might say then that Freemasonry, at its core, worships Baphomet. Whether you believe that or not really doesn't matter. One thing we know, universal is Freemasonry. This is from Morals and Dogma, and you can see Freemasonry is everywhere. This is just one page. It's in the Northern Europe, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Holland, it's in Germany, it's in Berlin, it's in Hanover, it's all over the place. It's in Southern Europe, it's in Asia, it's in South America, and it's in North America. It is universal in scope. At the temple in the United States of America in Washington, D.C., is this picture, this symbol. the ankh on the chest, the serpent around the neck, symbols of ancient Egypt. Freemasonry carries within its bosom the religion of ancient Egypt. The day that we were there, there were 2 lamps outside the front door of the temple in Washington. That doesn't look very clear. Is that very clear? Is that better? And what you'll see on this lamp, if you look very carefully, is the head of a goat. Some of you may want to move over this way so you can see this a little bit more clearly. If you don't believe that that's a goat, if you think it's something else, you might want to look at the bottom of the lampstand, because at the bottom, you see quite clearly, we have the hooves of a goat. The point being is, the Freemasons know that they're the goat. This map of Washington, D.C. delineates that Washington, D.C. was designed architecturally by Freemasonry, all with Masonic symbolism. Here is the rule and compass ending at the U.S. Capitol. The 2 legs are on the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. If I turn this way, you'll see that the House of the Temple, 13 blocks from the White House, is an inverted 5-pointed star with the tip of the pentagram directly on the White House. The Washington Monument is over here. We'll talk about that more. It's a point within a circle. This is a different picture, the real McCoy, and here you can actually see the top of the compass coming together in the circle up here by the cap. Now here is the Washington Monument. This is a little bit nondescript, but you know what the Washington Monument looks like, and every single patriotic picture that you see in this country almost has a picture of the Washington Monument in it. It's sort of a sign of American patriotism. Well, where does the Washington Monument come from? It's a copy of Cleopatra's Needle in Egypt. You see, basically what we're talking about is an Egyptian religion. Now, I don't have this in an acetate form, but this is a Christmas card from Pat and Shelley Buchanan. And it says, "May all the joys of this holy season of Christmas be yours." Is it a picture of a stable? Is it a picture of the Christ child? Is it a snowy scene? Yes. A snowy scene with the Washington Monument wrapped in a ribbon. Now you ask yourselves the question. You can ask Pat if you'd like. But the question is, why would anybody send a Christmas card like that? Now the other thing that's interesting is, if you believe in symbolism, you know, in our magazines we've got lots of ads for things. Ads which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This particular ad was for psoriasis. But I had to take a double take at this picture. Someone spent a lot of money with this picture describing, does this have anything to do with psoriasis, these 2 pictures? The answer is absolutely no. But what the heck is this? What does this have to do with anything? Well, obviously, it's sun worship. Here's a man standing on the top of a mountain worshiping the sun. Now, if you go to Taco Bell, those little plastic or little paper things that they put on the pallets that you eat, they have the same thing there. Now, what do we know from Mackey's Masonic Ritualist, which is a Freemasonic book? He says, pages 62 and 63, the point within a circle is an interesting and important symbol in Freemasonry. I just showed you the Washington Monument. Surrounded by the pool, if you look at it from the air, is a point within a circle. This symbol, says Mackey, is beautiful, somewhat obtruse, and an allusion to sun worship, and introduces us for the first time to that modification of it known among the ancients as the worship of the phallus. The phallus was an imitation of the male generative organ. It was represented usually by a column which was surrounded by a circle at its base, intended for the sciatus or female generative organ. This union, well represented by the point within the circle, was intended by the ancients as a type of the prolific powers of nature. The God of nature, you will hear Freemasonry talk about. The Christian believes that's the God that created nature. Freemasons believe that this is a natural religion, the religion of man, guided by the principle, the male principle, the generative power of the universe. This is just something somebody happened to send me after we had a little conversation at lunch about Freemasonry. Something that came out of his paper. It was at USA Today. And here's a picture of Gerald Ford, Roy Clark, Ernest Borgnine, Buzz Aldrin, Glenn Ford, the actor, showing that they're all Shriners. This is a picture of Time, February 17, 1986, with another interesting person in a Masonic pose. His name is Pat Robertson. This is from Newsweek, August 19, 1996. There's a very small picture in here that says sparring partners, as if there's a fight going on. And it has pictures of George Bush, Pat Robertson, Jack Kemp, and Bob Dole, and another man that I don't know. One of you may be able to tell me who he is. The point is, they're all Freemasons. There's no sparring going on here at all. Here's a picture of Pat Robertson, hand in hand with Yasser Arafat. I thought Yasser Arafat was a terrorist. I guess he's no longer a terrorist. Someone gave me this after speaking on Freemasonry in Florida. This is from a legal document in Florida. Future state buildings. Masons of Florida authorized to design and lay cornerstones without objection. The board adopted the following resolution. Whereas it has been the custom and practice of the Masonic fraternity from time immemorial upon due invitation to lay the foundation stones of public edifices and monuments. The foundation or cornerstone of our nation's capital was laid by George Washington at the time he was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Virginia. Whereas our Capitol building presently has 3 stones laid by the Masonic fraternity, one in the northeast corner of the center structure and the other 2 on the northeast corner of the east wing of the Capitol complex. Now therefore be it resolved by the Florida Cabinet, now sitting as the Department of General Services, proclaim and instruct that all future state buildings have a cornerstone provided by the state, and that the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge, Free and Accepted Masons of Florida, whose office is located at 220 Ocean Street in the city of Jacksonville, Florida, through J. Edwin Larson Lodge, number 361, Free and Accepted Masons of Tallahassee, Florida, be invited to design and lay these cornerstones according to their custom and practice. Be it further resolved that the 2 legislative wings now under construction be specifically included in this resolution, and immediate plans be made for their cornerstones. Be it further resolved that copies of this resolution be sent to the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge, adopted this 28th day of July, 1970. Signed by the Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Comptroller, Treasurer, Commissioner of Education, and Commissioner of Agriculture. End of quote of Florida Cabinet Minutes. This is a picture of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is a communist. Nelson Mandela, according to a friend of mine who's from Africa, is also a 33rd degree Freemason. The man standing next to him is Joe Slovo, dead now, ex-KGB agent. Nelson Mandela was taken around this country, wined and dined in every major city except one, Miami. And now he is a token of friendship, love, and peace for the United States of America. And here he is, being interviewed by Paul Crouch, Trinity Broadcast Network. Now, the interesting thing about Paul Crouch, in fact, aside from the fact that he's a blatant heretic, is he gives Yasser Arafat here a Masonic handshake. And that can be found in any Masonic textbook. And you see something is going on here. We're having a changing of the spiritual nature of the world. A global spirituality, says Robert Buehler. Changing the world from the inside out, says spiritual politics. And as I studied, I discovered that maybe what the Illuminati said was true. And in Unholy Alliances, I describe exactly what the Illuminati planned to do. Adam Weishaupt, his goal to destroy the states of Europe and the church. And how did he intend to do it? He intended to infiltrate occultic Freemasons, illuminated Freemasonry, into the top positions of all of the governments of the world, call them republics, and then because they all believed in a universal humanity of religion, they could all come together, destroy the church, and develop a Luciferian worldwide state. So, I'm not sure if it's natural, but my natural thought was to ask myself the question, okay, if that's what he intended to do, did he do it? Do we have any proof that Freemasonry controls our nation? Is that even possible? We get to vote. We get to choose. We're free here in this country. So what I find out is, going back to 1836, we had an anti-Masonic party in this nation. There were individuals between 1828, 29, 31, 33 who were doing everything in their power to prevent our country from becoming a Masonic country. They discovered that Freemasons controlled most of the positions, the political positions of power in the state of New York, the state of Massachusetts, and the state of Pennsylvania. I then find out that the leader of the anti-Masonic party in 1833 threw up his hands and said, they already have so much power and control that we're going to dissolve the anti-Masonic party. What that means, folks, is for the last 150 years, there's been nothing but Freemasons in the political positions of power. You name the political positions in this country. Well, then I find out that under Woodrow Wilson, anyone who was anyone, Secretary of State, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of the Treasury, Postmaster General, Secretary of Labor, Deputy Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, and Speaker of the House, all Freemasons. I find out that this just goes on and on and on. It went on under FDR. It went on throughout. I just won't go through it, but it's in Unholy Alliances. In Truman's cabinet, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, Attorney General, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Secretary of State, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Director of Office of Economic Stabilization, U.S. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Director of Office of Defense Mobilization, and the Supreme Court appointments, Freemasons. Well, now, this is very interesting, isn't it? Especially when you find out that Freemasonry is a religion. I have various quotes in here in my chapter called Freemasonry and the Occult. Freemasonry alone possesses the true religion, which is Gnosticism. Freemasonry is the universal religion, so says Freemasonry. Freemasonry says Masonry is the church of human progress. Satan is masterful, and we don't realize how masterfully deceiving he is. I'm like you. I want to think the world's an honest place to live in. I can shake my hand with somebody else and he'll live up to his part of the bargain. But that's really not the real world. John says the world is filled with wickedness. But we choose not to believe Scripture. We choose not to believe what it says. We want to say it doesn't mean that, he really meant something else. Well, that's just not true. And my point is that as I studied, I was dealing with this secular element called the Council on Formulations. And if any of you have seen my old tapes or read the Plan and Structure of America, you know that as we went from president to president to president to president, all we got was the Council on Formulations, the Council on Formulations, the Council on Formulations, and more of the Council on Formulations. They control our politics, they control our media, they control the publishing companies. I paraphrased a list. Unfortunately, I did it in the computer, and I guess I didn't reprint it, of what the Pope basically said in Humanum Genus. But I highlighted some things. I think I can get it out to you here. He said, the Roman pontiffs, our predecessors, in their incessant watchfulness over the safety of the Christian people, were prompt in detecting the presence and the purpose of this capital enemy. Immediately it sprang into the light instead of hiding as a dark conspiracy. The Masons themselves, if you read their esoteric literature, will tell you, they hid out in caves. They hid out from under the Church of Rome until about 1717, when they got together with the Rosicrucians and decided to begin to come into the light, to test, to see if they would be allowed to function in the light of day. Because in the days of the Inquisition, they were not allowed out of their little caverns. For what reason? Because the church understood the Luciferian nation of the secret societies. Their nature is Luciferian. They are of the occult, of Baphomet, of Baal. Since the early church knew that, and since Pope Leo XIII wrote against that, they had a very difficult time coming into the public view. But after he published Humanum Genus, which condemned Freemasonry, the Secretary of State became a man named Rolpolo, who was a secret society member himself. If you read Pacendi of Pope St. Pius X, you find out that he says the partisans of error were already in the bosom of the church. He mentions words like in the veins and in the heart of the church. That's pretty close to some vital territory. In a recent paper I had under Vatican, I read this. The subject of international controversy was a directive of the Holy Office of July 1st, 1949, excommunicating communists and all persons cooperating with the communists. That was annulled by John the 23rd. In principle, the USSR was not recognized by the Vatican until 1961, when John 23rd and Premier Khrushchev exchanged congratulatory New Year's messages. In 1965, Paul VI in New York received Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gromyko, who then made successive visits to the Vatican, 1966, 1967, 1970, 1979, and 1985. Kind of like family coming over for dinner. Then the Vatican entered into negotiations with Bulgaria. First Secretary of the Bulgarian Communist Party, T. Shishkov, paid a visit to Paul Wien, 1975, Czechoslovakia, GDR. Romania President Ceausescu paid a visit to Paul VI. Bet you didn't know that. In June 1978. The first secretary of the Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party, J. Kadar, visited Paul VI in June 1977. On June 3rd, 1963, the day of John the 23rd's death, The death of a head of the Vatican State was honored for the first time in the UN headquarters by a lowering of the flag to half-mast and a declaration of the UN Secretary General. On July 11, 1963, the Secretary General made a visit in the Vatican to the new Paul VI, who on March 21, 1964 appointed a new permanent observer to the UN with a task of concentrating on problems of peace, disarmament, and the Third World. Paul VI paid a visit to UN headquarters on October the 4th, 1965, and made a speech before the UN General Assembly against war, elevating the services and authority of the UN. He said, "You have and are continuing to do great work, teaching people peace. The UN," he said, "is a great school in which the art of peace is learned." He spoke in French before the United Nations. That speech was published in the international version of the New York Times. I have that article, that whole speech. And in that speech to the United Nations General Assembly, Paul VI basically said to the United Nations, "We are giving you the Catholic Church." UN Secretary General Kay Waldheim paid a visit to the Vatican February 1972. On this occasion, Paul VI said, "Today we wish once again to repeat what we said from the platform of the UN. We are ready to give this organization our full support." Promise Keepers, which is creeping into every single church in this nation, is all about the destruction of dogma and doctrine, completely offending what Paul said to Timothy in the 2 books of Timothy, to defend the doctrine of the faith. What I like to do today is go to the extreme to see where we are, just to prove my point. So I'll often go to someone's writings like Satanist David Spangler, or Manly P. Hall's Journey in Truth, another Satanist, to find out that what the witchcraft people and the Satanist people and the occultic people desire is a universal religion. This is Satan's desire, and this goes all the way back to the acetate I showed you before on the Tower of Babel. This is from Morals and Dogma, and I find these things so interesting. The seeds of decay were sown in the order of the temple at its origin. Hypocrisy is a mortal disease. It had conceived a great work. Now, great work. Do you remember I just mentioned speech to the United Nations? You are doing a great work. It had conceived a great work which it was incapable of executing. The Knights Templar, worshippers of Baphomet, driven out of Europe by the Pope and Philip the Fair. Why? Because it knew neither humility nor personal abnegation, because Rome was then invincible. I have a picture here. This is a picture of Cardinal Bernardin. Bernardin, I guess you say. Take a look at his right hand as I pass that around, and you'll see a very definitive gesture. In the book, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, we read, the true Mason is not creed-bound. See, you all believe in the Apostles' Creed. True Mason is not creed-bound. He realizes, with the divine illumination of his lodge, that as a Mason, his religion must be universal. Christ, Buddha, or Muhammad, the name means little. He worships at every shrine, bows before every altar, whether in temple, mosque, or cathedral, realizing with his truer understanding the oneness of all spiritual truth. Tomorrow I will show you acetates of John Paul II at the Jewish Temple. John Paul II at the World Council of Churches, John Paul II at the Trilateral Commission, John Paul II at the Mosque, and John Paul II at the Lutheran Church, John Paul II talking to the Patriarch Buddha, fulfilling this philosophy of the lost keys of Freemasonry. A man named Cahill, whose name you may know, said Freemasonry is the central enemy of the Catholic Church. Freemasonry, in its own words, is the counter-church. In the United States of America, they control virtually every office of the land. They say they're not a religion, but Albert Mackey in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry says, indeed, they are a religion. And the true Mason will support Freemasonry as if it is a religion. In the New Age, February 1918, we read, Masonry is more than a religion. Masonry is religion. As you are probably aware, Voltaire said, our ultimate end is the destruction of Catholicism and even of the Christian ideas. One Freemason said the Romish church founded on the Galilean myth began to decay rapidly from the very day on which the Masonic Association was established. With tongue and purse, with voice and money, interpreted, writes Albert Pike, with the press and, if needs be, with the sword, we will advance the cause of human progress. Freemasonry is the church of human progress, and labor to enfranchise human thought, to give freedom to the human conscience, above all from papal usurpation. Freemasonry is the soul, the unifying element, the energizing force of liberalism and of the whole anti-Christian movement. Thus, the true Masonic doctrine, says Reverend Cahill, is the divinity of man. Now we're seeing a global spirituality, which we know from its own words is a focus and purpose of Freemasonry. Freemasonry, the religion of the devil, promoting the Tower of Babel in a universal religion. Know your faith and promote your faith and challenge others as to the truth. And God will support you in that because He is the truth and the way and the life. And He is the only way. And there is no other. And that's something we must cling to in these last days.